All right, so get to be back for another awesome conversation with my friend Tim. Tim and I have we've known each other, through the online world for quite a few years now. Really looking forward to the day that we actually get to meet in person and hang out. Tim has, been on this journey with me from the No More Mr. Nice Guy group to a membership program I created, and then he jumped into the Zero Limits private coaching program in 2024, about June or so. So we're going to get to have a pretty awesome conversation, just talking about his experience, what he's created over, the couple of years that he's been working with me and wherever else we decide to go. So thanks for joining me here, Tim.
Hello, sir.
Um, Anything that you just want to like share about yourself so people get a sense of like who you are, where you are in the world, what you're up to?
Uh, I'm from Middle America, Iowa. Just your kind of average guy. Uh, Grew up on a farm. I was a farm kid growing up. Normal school, college. Got a bachelor's degree. Joined the Air Force right out of high school at 18. I was a F-16 crew chief mechanic for 7 years, and then I decided to go fly airplanes, and so I went to pilot training. Um, Flew KC-135s for 20 some years. And I am 15 days into being a civilian. That's what the beard's for. So I just retired from that. See, got two boys, two great boys. One of them's in the Air Force, taking after his dad a little bit. And then one of them is still in high school. That's the freshman. So he's starting out. I was married for 19 years and unfortunately ended in a divorce. Um, and That is when I kind of started doing a lot of introspection and looking at myself. Uh, and it was an eye opener for me for sure. Um, I would say I was a semi type A type personality where, I was a pilot, man, and I realized that that was a nice guy. If you haven't read the book, highly recommend it. And I was in a low. The divorce was terrible. And Really, really, it was at first it was pretty ugly. It's actually not bad. We get along better now than when we were married. But It was very painful. It was very, very hard. And so I was going through some veterans therapy for other things, and my therapist pushed me towards the No More Mr. Nice Guy book. He actually took me to the bookstore and bought it for me. And I read that book twice in 3 days. It was like a autobiography. It just kind of it blew my mind. And if I'm reading his other book, The Big Stick, right now, and it was a big stick upside the head. Um, and so through that, I started researching No More Mr. Nice Guy stuff, and that's when I fell upon the No More Mr. Nice Guy Facebook page and just hit follow. Just started following and was welcomed with great enthusiasm. It was one of the better choices of my life, and there's a great group of men. Um, and through that, it's really taught me, just the importance of masculinity and learning that. And I just wanted to dig in more. And so through that, I joined a couple. I joined what was the No More Nice Guy group with
Yep.
Andrew that he led, and then did that. Um, and Did another group with him, and then after that, we started doing personal coaching, and I am extremely grateful for Andrew and everything that he's done for me. So,
Thank you.
that's about it. I'm, currently flying for a civilian corporate job, uh, and enjoying my retired life. It's been, it's. I'm definitely a very different man than I was 4 or 5 years ago when we started this.
Yeah, absolutely. As a bit of a side note, I wanted to speak to this piece. So I actually didn't know this about you, that you said that you were doing aircraft mechanics before you
Mm-hmm.
were a pilot.
It was,
And
yeah.
is that a common well, I'll just speak to it. I'm trying to find the words of it. Like, is that a common pathway to becoming a pilot, or is it generally that people just like outright become pilots in
It goes both ways. It's kind of,
Yeah.
six of one, half does the other. It was, I used the Air Force to pay for my college.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have a college degree to be a pilot in the Air Force.
Oh,
And
right.
that's why I enlisted right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Crew chiefing was, I was a farm kid. It was natural. French turning was natural for me, and one of the funner jobs I had. I loved being out there working the jets. It was great. Um, but then, as a kid working the jets, I'd see these guys in flight suits come walking out to the airplanes,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, I bet you chicks dig that. So I was like, I kind of want to be one of those. And so that's why I
Yeah.
did it. So
It's so cool. It's so cool. There was something that you spoke to that I wanted to highlight. I can't remember it now. So I'll leave it for now. So okay. So yeah, like and like would you say that was No More Mr. Nice Guy sort of your first like foray into personal development, or like was there other resources that you were kind of coming across or looking at, in that stage of life?
yeah, at that point, I was kind of grasping for anything.
Mm,
Um, there's a couple different things that I read. What was it, The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis? I read that, and I read it. A buddy of mine hit me towards that, and there's a couple others like uh, what's the one? Love. I can't remember the name of the book that I was reading. There's a couple different books that I read, but
yeah,
the No More Mr. Nice Guy just really, really was an eye opener for me.
yeah,
And I've had the fortunate opportunity to actually talk to Dr. Glover, and
yeah.
and it's been life changing for me. That book is amazing. I'm listening, not right now, but I'm listening to, that was what I was listening to before I got on the call. And um, I've given a book to my son. I've given the books to so many men that I know. Um, and it's life changing.
Absolutely. And so from reading the book and just sort of starting to get present to the nice guy tendencies, the nice guy behaviors, what did you start to see for yourself in your own life? Like you mentioned, like, hey, I'm a pilot. As a pilot, it's generally like a alpha role, in itself. And yet it sounds like you're starting to see like, oh, there's some tendencies that are occurring underneath that might be worth sort of shining some light on.
Well, I realized how much of a people pleaser I was. I always wanted, and that comes from my childhood. But I realized that, in my marriage and everything, how much, the wife was, well, for lack of a better way to put it, it was an abusive relationship. It wasn't fun. And I let her walk all over me, and I didn't take control of the marriage, and I didn't take
Mm,
control of the relationship, and I didn't have that masculine point at home. Um, I was that way at work. I was, but it actually started feeding into it. It started feeding into the job with the pilot and stuff like that. And I would start losing my self confidence. I started losing a lot of things, and it actually affected me pretty hard. Um, and I believe wholeheartedly that if I would have gotten that book in my 20s, it'd be a whole nother story of where I'm sitting at right now.
yeah.
And just in ways of you know the outlook of how you look at things, and you know my confidence was beat down so low that I didn't make the decisions, and I didn't want to, because I didn't want to screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so uh, that's one thing that I really noticed in it was not taking charge of my own life personally.
Yeah.
um, the phrase, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy, I hate that phrase with a passion now. And that's what I lived by. I lived with,
Yeah.
I had to make her happy. That was my sole job in the world, and it's not.
Yeah. Well, and um what resources did you have, or just that, like what resources or even like direction did you have to like create marriage, to that's not the best way of sharing it, but I think you get where I'm sort of looking there. Like, as you just look back at that marriage, was there ever a time where there were conversations happening with other men, or like, resources that were out there, things that would actually be able to like create that awareness around a marriage, or were you largely left like kind of in the dark, having to
Well,
figure it out on your
I
own?
was your typical nice guy where I went to women, right? I grew up
Yeah,
uh, with my dad was a farmer, and it was in the 80s, and we were losing the farm.
yeah,
And my brothers, they're 12 and 10 years older than I am. So by the time that I got old enough to go outside and help dad with the farm, do masculine type things, I was just in the way.
mm,
I
mm,
was just I couldn't hold the flashlight right, or I was always, just I was a
right,
kid. I was being a kid, and I would get yelled at for being a kid. But
mm,
uh, when I was around my mom, I wasn't right. I was inside. I was, I learned how to cook. I learned, I tried to keep a relatively clean house, and I remember my mother saying things. They had a rough marriage. They did. Um,
yeah,
and I remember her saying things to me as a kid. Don't be like your dad.
mm,
If you, don't treat your wife like your dad treats me.
mm,
And don't uh, you know one thing that kept me in my marriage longer than it should have, or that there's a whole other story there that I could go down, but we don't have time. But she used to say to me, the best way to love your kids is to love their mother. And then I went to a Catholic school uh,
mm.
where all the teachers were required to be female. Right, so I had all of this
Wow.
female influence in my life.
Yes.
This is what the book has led me to understand. I've had all
Yeah.
this female influence in my life, to where throughout my marriage and stuff, I was very intimidated around other men.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
never been much of a sports guy. I like sports, I like football and stuff like that, but it seemed like every time I would go to whatever, they'd be sitting there talking about the last football game or the last stuff like that, and it never interested me much. But I'm a for lack of a better way to put it, I'm pretty handy, pretty crap. I like making
Yeah.
things, and I like cooking, and I like doing that kind of stuff. And uh, um, I reached out to more women for that advice, discussion type thing, and didn't have a lot of masculine influence in my life and in my
Yes.
marriage at the time. And so I, that was a detriment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that, right? Just even the childhood experiences, um, the sort of cultural setup to be influenced by women, because I mean, the first thing that I just think about is like my own sons, right? My sons are in
Mm-hmm.
Catholic school right now, and I very much see that feminine influence, right? And
Mm-hmm.
lack of masculine influence there, right? But it's so common, these days to, it's like I think a lot of guys when they discover, say no more Mr. Nice Guy, or even just this like masculinity movement, we'll call it,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of like shame and guilt for how we've been, but it's like we were socialized this
Yeah,
way,
100%.
and so that's what a cool opportunity then to like champion all of who you are, because you have amazing skill sets, and then just start to unpack some of that, and then also just like you know creating these pathways forward, right? Like, oh, okay, for example, if traditionally you've been seeking the advice of women to be in a men's group, to
Mm-hmm.
to be connected to men, that type of thing. And that's just one of the areas. So that's just I really appreciate you speaking to that. So as you started reading No More Mr. Nice Guy, started to get aware of your tendencies, how was that process just on your own of like making changes?
I was king of covert contracts.
Mm-hmm.
I was really good at that. I would always get so mad at my ex-wife for things that were going on in my brain, and I never would say anything to her. Well, number one, I was worried of what would happen if I did say it, and I'll say that anytime I did voice my concerns in that relationship situation, I was usually beat down about it. You
Mm,
poor baby, blah blah blah. So
mm,
that added to it, but um, in from reading that book and moving forward, I've realized that no, you know what, my needs are important, and I need to voice them. And so that's something that I've been really trying to do, and seeking out, just making sure that I understand my needs. That was
Mm-hmm.
really, and it still is. It's a struggle for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really one of the hardest things for me, was even to figure out what my needs were.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with that, and I still struggle with the boundaries too of setting, defining my boundaries and setting them. It's still an issue that I struggle with, but I know that I struggle with it, and that's what this the book and the coaching and everything has taught me and got me to know, is that, hey, you struggle with this. Um, this is a weak point, so this is kind of something that you can keep in mind as you're going through your day and your decisions.
For sure, for sure. And I'm actually going to make a note about that needs part because I think, there are times where, I even sort of just like, I don't pay as much attention to that now, with
Mm-hmm.
the guys because I'm so much in sort of the mindset of like, okay, I know most of my needs, and
Yeah, yeah,
yet there is such a need for that support, right? Of just like supporting men to just like, hey, it's okay to have needs. It's
yeah,
okay to have a voice,
yeah.
these types of things.
I was so
So,
used
oh
to
yeah, go
I
ahead.
was so, I was so used to making sure that everybody else's needs are met, that I thought that's what life was about. That's what I thought was happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had I had a hell of a nice house for the divorce. I was making sure everybody was set and everything was good, and
Yes.
everything was taken care of, and the boys had everything that they needed, and all this stuff. But my life was in utter disarray. My shop was a disaster. Anything that I had, if I had, I love woodworking and I love creating stuff and everything like that. And if I had a spare 5 minutes, maybe I would be able to go out there. But I
Yeah.
never made it a priority, and I never made it a focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
again, it's the more and more that I dive into this work, there are a lot of similarities for men,
mhm,
right? That like a lot of um expectation, a lot
yeah,
of, and just like as a man, there's a lot that we have to take care of in our life. We're responsible for a lot of things. And as you're speaking to, very common, what happens is that everybody else's needs get taken care of, our wife, our kids, other people, and then we're last.
yep,
And we end up getting the scraps and we end up getting burnt out and jaded,
yeah,
frustrated.
yeah, yeah. A buddy of mine put it, and I mean this in a existential kind of way, or just kind of a thing to keep in the mind, your back of your mind. Him and I were talking about something the other day, and he's like, Tim, the world kind of needs a little bit more toxic masculinity, just a little bit, and and I don't mean, don't be a dick or an asshole or anything like
Sure.
that, but sometimes, you know what, you just got to say, you know what, I want this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you got to make that a priority. That's
Yeah,
something
and
that I've
and
learned.
even it's like you could even just say the world just needs more masculinity. Just
Yeah,
those traditional qualities of masculinity, like
yeah,
integrity, commitment, creation, those types of things. Absolutely.
yep,
So, um, I'm curious about this because for every man out there in the world that is in a place where they come across personal development resources, they start doing this work and potentially hit roadblocks and still kind of keep on their own path. They kind of lone wolf it, so to speak. What occurred for you where you're like, okay, I actually could use outside support? Like what kind of led to that decision for you in the
oh,
early
i
stages?
was i was hurting. I was in a bad place. Divorce was bad. I was sleeping on a buddy's. I was at a buddy's house. I was sleeping on my mom's house again. I'm telling you, I mean, I had a 5 acres. I had a beautiful place, a giant machine shed. I had this gorgeous place, and I lost the whole thing, and my ex-wife wanted to take my kids away from me. That was my whole life, was being a dad. And she got a yeah. A divorce is ugly. I don't recommend it if anybody. I mean, unless you have to, but if you can work through it, I don't recommend it. But uh, I was at a low point. I was bad, I mean, I'll admit it. I had the 9 mil in my mouth a couple
Mm-hmm.
times. I was that low, and um, I was going to my therapist through the thank God for the the vet center and the VA and
Yeah,
veteran
absolutely.
resources. Um, uh, and like I said, he directed me towards this book, it was funny because I told him I'm like, dude, I'm tired of being the damn victim. That's what I said to him. That's how he got me there. Is I'm tired of it, of feeling this way, of feeling like I'm being run through the mud. And he's like, oh, dude, I got a book for you to read. Um, and that was the that's really, 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 really what pushed me. Reading that book pushed me towards realizing that I mean, and I'll admit this in my marriage and in my what caused divorce. I will 100% take onus of my response of my uh, role in that,
Yeah.
of the mistakes that I made in the 100% will. It was just as much my fault as it was hers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I realized that, and I realized that I don't want to do that again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Okay. And so now when it came to us starting to be in connection and communication with each other, like, um, how were those sort of initial conversations or those initial interactions, and the reason why I'm pointing to this is like because you were already working with like the VA therapist, right, for example. So
mhm.
what did you start to see through our conversations that may have been different than what you already had for support?
Well, I'll admit that our conversation. I mean, starting this whole thing was difficult for me.
Mm.
Talking about myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, talking about my feelings. It's still foreign to me talking about my feelings. I still struggle with that one too. Um, and just voicing those was difficult. And just like I said, I was still very intimidated by men. Um,
Mm.
and in men's groups, and I'm like, I don't want these guys to think I'm a big puss. And I'm a Midwest, uh, born and raised Iowa. Military. I'm pretty. Oh, what's the word I want to say? Pretty stubborn, pretty ingrained in my thought processes, and I'm like, this stuff's kind of hokey. And then once I started letting myself uh, be involved, and once I started, being parts of the I just I was kind of just topping on the Facebook page, and then I think you reached out to me and we talked and did some Zoom classes and stuff like that, just you and I just talking. And then you talked me into joining the groups and stuff, and there's a couple times where I'm like, God, these guys are just weird. But then I got into it a little bit more, and I'm like, these guys aren't weird. They're just going through life,
Yeah.
just like I am. And each one has their own thing, and the thing that was cool is each one wanted to listen to my own thing, you
Yes.
know, and and the more and more I realized it. And one thing, I was on a call with Dr. Glover one time on a Zoom call with him, and I was going through I was fighting the toxic guilt stuff and stuff like that, and I was just kind of talking about things, and he mentioned, how many guys in here feel the same way that Tim does, and every single one of them raised their hands,
Mm-hmm.
and that was an eye opener to me that, hey, dude, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and and that's one thing that this has really opened my eyes up to other men, that there's a lot of men out there suffering,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of men hurting, each in their own way, and um, if we don't do something about it, there's they talk about the 22 a day for the military or suicides and stuff like that.
Yes.
Um, it's a real thing, and people. I never. I feel horrible about someone that does it, but I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can stop one dude from realizing that he's not alone,
Yeah.
then that's worth it. Um,
100%.
and that's what these are. I mean, we as men, and it's a generational thing too. My dad and growing up and stuff, they were different. It was just different back then, right? Now I don't know how he did it without the resources that we have now. But
Yep.
they had things like the Legion and the what was it called, the VFW, all those kind of
Sure.
things where men were able to get together, and that's just kind of how they did it back then. But our generations, from my generation on, we just don't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like we really need to get back into that because the the excuse me, the feminization of men is a bad thing.
Well, and I think too, like we look at our parents' generation or even our grandparents' generation, there was more family connection, more community ties, more just like connection with men. And I would even say probably less burden,
Yeah, I would agree.
like, and so, and
And they didn't have
probably
they
still
didn't have these damn things either.
for sure. But you can also, as I understand, like my grandfather was an alcoholic,
Yeah.
for
Oh
example,
yeah.
right? So a lot more of those like numbing tendencies as well, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
nowadays there's actually erosion of a lot of these things, families spending time together, men being able to just be together and be in community, that type of
Yep.
thing, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's very, like you said, it's no surprise that the suicide rates are where they are for men,
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thing.
Well,
So
another thing is
yeah.
man, go hit the gym. Go to
Mm-hmm.
the gym and hit some weights. That is such well, it brings you back into some masculinity, right? I mean, if you have a job where you sit at a desk and don't do anything,
Yeah,
there's no physical activity or something, you got to have that. That's part of being a man.
absolutely.
Um, and so that's been a huge help for me. I don't, I if I skip a day of going to the gym, it screws up my whole day.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's one of the huge things. Hit the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you've been in these groups, you've done the membership program that I'd ran in the past, starting to get sort of connected to these weird guys that actually, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe there is something here. And what made you decide to kind of take that up a level and go into private coaching?
I was curious. Um, and I got a lot out of the group things. Don't get me wrong, I did. Um, but I had to share that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wanted something a little bit more personal, a little bit more focused on me. And so that's what kind of pushed me towards the coaching.
Yeah.
Um, and and the thing about it too is I'm just like every other dude. There was things that I didn't want to say in a group setting, or there was things that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to open up about. And then, but Andrew's going to laugh and nod, but I mean, I'd let it all out when we're talking.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's valuable.
Absolutely.
Honesty with an integrity and just if you to be like an integrated man, if you want to talk about, but you just need to be open and honest. And hey, man, here's the shit I'm going through.
Yes.
What do I do?
Yeah,
What,
for
what,
sure. For sure. And like you said, right? Like just there's no hiding.
yep.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
You're in the space together and like, it's just there's more time together. And in that there's more. I'm gonna use the word intimacy, but there really is, right? There's more just connection. There's we're partnering together in this way of creating your life, right? And so
Yeah.
I think it's huge. So and what was it actually like to sort of step into this container of private coaching where you can't hide anymore, and like we're having these sort of deeper conversations?
Accountability is a big thing. And you know that sometimes I'm pretty bad at meeting my things I'm supposed to be my homework. Um, but that's been a big thing of oh shit, Andrew's gonna be pissed at me if I don't get this done. Um, but so that's a big thing for me was the accountability of it. And just the uh, companionship, having a dude to bounce things off of, and to ask, you've got so much experience talking to other men, and you've probably seen a million different ways to Sunday on how things have gone on in people's lives, and it's just a good um, aspect of um, advice and opinion.
Hmm.
And then also there's direction. You have some of the things
Hmm.
that you have me fill out and work out. Those are things that I would never do on my own.
Yes.
You know, and those are all good tools um, that you have out there that are good for men to use. Because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just like every other man too, right? I'm a linear kind of guy. I'm looking for direction. I'm looking for, hey, how do I get from here to here? What are the steps? And you kind of
Hmm.
have some of those steps available that help you get there, because I'm not a just uh and I need that guidance, and that's what this has provided
Hmm.
for me and helped me with.
Yeah, there's one piece that I want to speak to that, I've become much more clear in terms of even just conversation with men is that like the the thing that I see is that there's a lot of guys when they don't have a structure like this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be coaching, but even like the ability to create structure and follow through and having these sort of checkpoints, right,
Yep.
that can
Yep.
be created on our own. Obviously I think like the coaching container goes much deeper into it, but like I want to call it for what it is. And I think the thing that takes a lot of guys out or just sort of stalls them is that like they'll make progress and then they'll stop, or like
Yep.
they don't have these continuous sort of practices to engage with. And
Hmm.
so it's this very start and stop, some momentum then loss of momentum, whereas when you're in a container like this, what I've been really present to lately is like it's continuous, it's
Hmm.
continuous motion.
Yep.
And I think it really does have an impact, in terms of that long-term growth.
Well, like you said, it's continuous motion. I mean, that was one thing that I really, at least I'm doing something, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm making forward progress by doing this. Um, because if I wasn't doing this, then I would just be here,
Yeah.
and that's for men to not have this, have and then, something to work towards, or something that's in our DNA. And,
Yes.
and if we don't have that, we flail. And I was there, right?
Yeah.
I made my peak of, I was a pilot. I made it, right? I got all my stuff together when I really didn't. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
I still needed to grow, and I still needed um to go. One challenge that I'm having right now, like I said, I've had this major job change, and and I'm a very structured animal. I wake up in the morning, I shave over here, I shave, everything's pretty routine. Well, with this new job, my routines have just gone, because I don't have an office to go to. I don't have a And so that's something that's been a continuous struggle for me. And you talked about, you go to a point and then you stop. I'm kind of in the middle of that right now, where I'm trying to restart that and stuff. And you help me point that out and you help me get through it. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one of the things that you spoke to that's really cool and worth highlighting is that the thing that's there is like like you said, you've created a lot of great stuff in your life. You're already a very successful individual, and so there is almost like a predictable path of life that would be created from that. We could
mhm.
we could probably say like from where Tim is, that path could be created. And what the coaching does is it actually takes that, it puts it on a different sort of trajectory, a path
Mhm.
of the unknown. Like, so a
Yep.
lot of these things that we're doing is counter to that predictability. It's really, instead of it just being predictable, it's being created. You're
Right.
designing the life that you want to live. And
Yep.
that's the difference of what we're doing here.
Well, I was full in on the great muse of life of, like, hey, I've made this point, now life's going to be easy. Oh, that's such the biggest lie of you can. Life doesn't get any easier.
Mm,
Life gets harder. The older you get, if you think that's such a myth that the older you get, the life gets easier. No, and that's something that this is helping me get through, and realizing that, I lived this whole point of, I'm going to be on easy street once I hit there, and all of a sudden I'm like, no, this,
yes.
no, and you just got to keep working, you got to keep working, and you got to keep pushing, and that's something that has this is helping me keep that going.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at this point of the, experience, what are just some of the things that you feel like have been wins or you've created for yourself?
Um, it definitely has boosted my confidence. I've I catch myself now, or I shouldn't say catch myself now. I do when I walk into a room, you know, in my mind, I say I'm a confident man. I walk into a room and it's in my mind, like, hey, I'm a pretty good dude that's in this room. Before I would kind of like cower and I'm like, oh, there's that guy over there. He looks tougher than me, or that blah blah blah.
Right.
No, it doesn't matter now. Now I walk into a room and I'm like, hey, I'm Tim. Here I am.
Yeah.
You know, uh, so that's one thing that I've noticed about me that's changed. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just I my defense mechanisms, those different kind of things that I see, I notice them when I'm in them,
Hmm.
and that helps me understand the decisions that I make. You know, I still screw it up, 100%.
Hmm.
But at least now I kind of am like, oh, you dummy, why didn't you do? I can self-analyze it a little bit better, and get ready to move on to the next one. Then I'm going to probably screw up, but that's life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of just grace and I love that piece that you spoke to, in terms of like that just sort of ownership of you,
mhm.
that you can step into a room and yeah, there's always going to be sort of that like, jiving and feeling of it. But like ultimately, fundamentally, you can just come back to yourself and be like, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
good.
good.
I get to be me and,
Mhm.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, if they don't like it, no, that tough shit, they're losing out.
For sure. That's awesome.
So,
And where are some of the roadblocks that you're seeing now or some of the things that you're running into that, is a part of the next steps for you?
oh, I'm still a recovering nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be never ending. And Dr. Glover talks about it, but I still catch myself people pleasing. I still catch myself not putting my priorities in the forefront. Um, so those are things that's a constant work that I got to do. Um, and then I just making sure that I'm still moving forward. That's I'm a single. I'm single dad, single living in my house. I got. Uh, um, I could 100% sit on a couch and watch TV all day.
Yeah.
I have no problem doing that, and I could go sit at the end of the bar and drink all day long
Mm-hmm.
too. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that that does me no good. Um,
Yes.
it's the short term satisfaction out of it. Um, and this has made me realize that hey, I still got to look for the long term. I'm almost 50, but I don't want to be at 80 and suck.
Right.
So I want to I got to keep going,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to be that man for my kids, right? My boys.
Yep.
I want to be that masculine influence on them. And that's honestly that's another thing that's really helped me with raising my oldest son right now. He's in his early 20s and he's doing all the struggles we all did, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's given me the ability. I mean, he was calling me and talking to me last night, and one thing that I've learned, I'm like, okay, but do you want me to listen or do you want me to give you advice? What do you need?
Yeah. Huge.
And he's like, oh, Dad, I kind of need you to listen. I'm like, all right, sounds good. You just go.
Yeah.
And um, those are all they're things that before being the nice guy fixer guy I would have just dived right in with advice and kind of stuff like that, but no, I'm trying to show him that hey, but it's okay to talk to other men and to get this out there. Um and so yeah, it's helped me huge.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
have long ways to go.
Yeah, and and I would say too, we'll dive more into this in our future conversations, but probably some really good places and probably some confusing places is really starting to dive into some of those unconscious belief structures.
Hmm.
Some of those things like we've been doing some work around the people pleasing. Well, why? Like what is the belief structure behind that? Right? As we start to unpack that, and that's that deeper work, right? That's
Well,
sometimes the stuff that we can't actually see, we can't actually like touch.
that damn guilt gut ache that you get, but I'm sure everybody gets it. Trying to overcome that is a
Mm-hmm.
nightmare.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. For sure. So and as you look into the future, like what are some things that you really want to create for yourself? Like what's really there for you?
um, well, listening to the Dr. Glover, I still got to work on my great cake of a life. I still got
Mm,
to build me, and that's something that's kind of a big thing for me is I want to be the best me that I can be, as integrated as I can, and I still flip it up, but I'm trying. And I want to, uh, I've my whole life is centered around military. I've been there for almost 30 years, and so now
mm,
I got to figure out what's Tim look like
yes.
not in the military,
Yes.
and so that's a challenge for sure. Right now he's got a beard and longer hair, but I'm working on it. Uh, um, and that's I don't know what he's going to be look like in 5-10 years,
Mm,
but at least I have an idea of, hey, I have a an ability to look ahead and say this is kind of where you need to be, bud,
yeah.
and we'll move on from there. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much goodness in that, right? Like, it's really creating that second half of life too, right? And
mhm.
on your terms.
Yep.
And one of the things that we haven't necessarily dived into, but as a part of this creation is actually being able to create your own identity, right? So a lot
Yes.
of people in the world sort of feel like their identity is fixed.
Yep.
Hey, I've been this way for 40 years, it's not going to change. But at the real depths of it, the real core of it is actually no, like our identity is malleable, right? So
Oh yeah.
you've been in the military, you've been in the Air Force, and that's been a part of your identity 100%,
Hmm.
and still getting to forge that pathway as you see it going forward. That's a true art. That's a
Well,
true masculine skill.
one thing that I always kind of keep in the back of my mind, or what is I want to walk into a room of people that used to know me and they go, wow, that's Tim.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want them to say, holy shit, what happened to him? I want them to say, oh wow, that's he's changed.
Yeah.
I want that kind of confidence in my life, and that's what I'm building for.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I do I fully believe, that going through these steps and understanding yourself and understanding your tendencies and things, um, leads you to a better person.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what a lot of this does is it helps you just understand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And once
Mm-hmm.
when you start getting closer to, I don't think you'll ever get there, but once you get closer to it exudes out of you that you are that confident and that you understand. Okay, this is how I'm going to react, and then people, you're not to say predictable, but people will come to you and be like, this guy knows his shit,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something different, right? It's
Yeah,
like, oh, there's something different about this guy,
right.
and that's magnetic.
Hmm.
There's a magnetism to that. There's a magnet to that, right? And
Yep.
like you spoke to, right? Because that's just coming from within. You don't have to
Right.
change anything. You just get to be who you are, and then the
Hmm.
world gets created from that place,
Right.
which
And,
is
and
really
and
cool.
if you're in this for relationship stuff, or if you're trying to, girls sense it. They sense
Mm-hmm.
a man that's got his shit together.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say that's got his shit. That's working towards getting his shit together.
Yeah.
You exude that. So
Mm-hmm.
so if that's your goal, then that's another reason to do this.
For
But it's
sure.
also, like I said, for the most part, it's you need to get to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the rest will follow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as we start to wind down for this conversation, is there anything else that you just want to say about the coaching experience, your experience, just anything that's there that maybe we haven't spoken to?
Well, when I started, I was very hesitant about spending money.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember that, I was just like, oh, divorced, and I don't, but I was like, I need to move forward, and I need to do this, and this is what I need to do, and it was money well spent.
Yeah.
So if anybody's hesitant on that part, I mean, obviously, don't put it on a credit card, but uh, um, make it happen, make it work. Do what you can.
Yes.
Do what you can to get there, because the outcome, the struggle, it's a struggle. It's an upward climb to get there, and I'll never stop climbing it. But it's for me so far, it's been worth it for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
And
shouldn't
it,
say so far. For me in my life, it's been worth it. I would never look back and say, "Boy, I wished I would have done that."
for sure.
And I'm glad. I'll look at it now and say, "I'm glad that I did it."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, you did it in steps too, right?
Hmm.
We had conversations early on about, even the group program or, that type of thing. And at that time, it wasn't working out, right? and
Hmm.
and we stayed in conversation,
Yep.
around it,
Yep.
and there was a moment where it made sense, right? And I
Yeah.
think that what you're speaking to, um it's so important to find support structure wherever you
Correct.
can, right?
Yep.
Maybe it's not the coaching program, but find the way to get support. And I,
Yep.
I think the thing that I really would encourage men to is like, I see a lot of people sort of just like trying out different things, which is
Hmm.
good. It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing, but the a deeper conversation of really just sitting with yourself. I'll this is a question that I ask myself, is like, what is most needed right now for me? What is the
Yep.
support structure that is most needed for me right now?
Yep.
Because like, if if a man is really struggling with some stuff, probably going to a sound bath or like a Reiki session, it's probably not going to do it. It's
That
probably,
wouldn't do it for me.
and so
Yeah. You try to get me to do the
go.
meditations, and I'm kind of like, this is dumb.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that, so the way that I sort of hold that is like, they're all great things, but sometimes those are like accessories,
Yep.
right? The true work is going to be getting to the core of it and getting like perspective on your life,
Hmm.
having that support. So, I mean, that's the big thing that I would speak to is like, yeah, if say the coaching isn't the thing, it's like, find something that's really going to help you now, whatever it is, AA
Yep.
group,
Yep.
men's group, uh, something that's going to get you into the game.
Well, it was like you said too, and it was actually a big deal to me because I was in a, like I said, I was in a really big low. But you would just reach out and ask how I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You would do that. You would just message me and say, "Hey Tim, how you doing?" You know.
Yeah.
And there was guys in the group that would do that too, and I got to be, pretty good friends with that, with doing that. And so that's another thing that you could that people can definitely do is that this is a great group of men, right? Any of
Yes.
them, for the most part. I mean, if you want to talk to me, just send me a message. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be there for other men. Um, I'm gonna tell you if you're full of crap or not. But that's what we're supposed to do as men, right? Um, but if anything, like you're saying, this is a great resource just to reach out for advice if you need it. And
Absolutely.
and give me a message if you need it. Reach out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for speaking to that. And is there any, okay, obviously a great opportunity, right? For guys that are listening to this, if they, want a man in their corner, just somebody to be in connection with, to have this opportunity to reach out to Tim. And is there any other things that you're up to, or like you just want to speak into the world where people could, potentially find you in the future for businesses or anything like that?
Well, I'm trying to start. It's I've been working for the man, the government for 20, 30 years. And so I'm trying to start stuff on my own. I'm trying to start a home inspection business because I'm kind of, I like that kind of stuff and handy. So if anybody's got any advice on that, I'll take it. Um,
Yeah.
but it's just I for me, delving into this entrepreneurial world is a whole new animal, and that's another thing that
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a great tool of. There's tons of other men that are out there that have been doing this, for years. I've got a good buddy of mine here in town he's he's 15 years younger than me, but I go to him for advice,
Yeah.
because he's been doing it, and so that's another thing that this would be a great tool of men being men and helping each other out. That's the big thing,
100%.
is helping each other out. So
Well, awesome, man. Well, sounds great. Well, and I'll make sure to, put your contact, your Facebook contact
yep,
information
yep, sounds good.
in the, the show notes afterwards. As we wrap up for today, first of all, thanks for like just being willing to dive into this and really just share like your journey. And some really great pieces came out of this conversation. Like, just the evolution of man, the nice guy tendencies, the need for masculine connection. Those
Hmm.
were just some of the things, and so really thanks for bringing it. Can I give you some acknowledgement here, before we end this call?
Please.
Yeah, yeah. I really want to acknowledge you for your your journey, because one of the things that we haven't necessarily dove into as much, we've done a little bit of it, but is actually looking at like, how are you raised, how what was the impact of childhood on adulthood. And the thing that really was there for me in that is like, it takes a courageous man, a man with humility, who's willing to like look at that and say, what, like, there are ways that I can just deepen into my masculine, and and just, I don't have it all figured out, and really like allowing that door to open to new pathways, because I'm so present to all that you've created and who you've been, and like in that conversation of like predictability versus possibility, it's like I have a sense that even in that predictable pathway, there would still be a lot of great things created. There would probably still be some things missing,
Oh yeah.
like life, like peace, and fulfillment. But like, I think the really humbling part of that is like, the success trajectory, whatever that means, would have been really high. And so I just really acknowledge you for being willing to step on that other path, that path of fulfillment, that path of joy, that path of peace, because it takes something to create that. It
Yeah.
doesn't just come. You've got to be able to like really like step out onto the court and really like make this happen, and continually look and continually be in these types of conversations. So really thank you so much, and thank you for your wisdom as well. I think that any man who's going to come listen to this conversation is going to glean just a lot of like insight, and like I, I fully believe that like a man could come listen to this conversation and actually feel like, I'm not alone.
I
That
hope.
like there's other men that have been on this journey with me, like me, in that sense. So
Mhm.
thanks for bringing it.
Yeah, thank you. No, again, that's one thing that I realize is none of us are alone. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I do not ever hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Tim.
Yep.